that you're interested in this farming thing for many years. It's time to drop your pen, which was your sword, as you typically say as journalists, and you decided to venture into farming. Take us through a little bit of your journey.
Researching and having a look at what's happening in the farming world. And I used to, when I was traveling, I would want to stay at like a working farm just to be able to see what's going on. And in 2007, I went to the farm that I'm in now. And I got in there and I said to the farmer, I like your place, I want to buy it, I want to be a farmer. And he took one look at me and he said, Kanje boer. And I said, no, I can't. And he said, no, I don't want to sell my farm to somebody who can't farm. So I looked at him and I said, so what are you going to do about it? Because I'm interested. And you want to sell your farm, I'm interested. So what are you going to do? So he said to me, okay, if you have time, you give yourself time and you give me time, you can come to this farm and you'll learn and I'll take you through the paces of what's going on. So I started visiting the farm. And one of the lingering things about going there in the morning at 6 o'clock, I would be there like very early in the morning, is the breakfast that I had.
Uh-huh.
I mean, every time I got there, for some reason or another, there was this pap and boerewors breakfast and tea. And I'm thinking, aye, man, this is not how it's done. And it kept on, whenever I go there, there will be Tanermin on the other side who's sort of like feeding you as you go. And she says, you've got, and you'll come and you'll stop. Yeah. And I said to him, because you speak so, get lost. So I would take it and me everything. And that for me, because it's going to be this objection. And there we go, he's going to say, a long time we would have this away in a half and, just phone me, said, don't despair, just stick around, he will sell, he's just not very. So I come in with my money and eventually I look up, there's nothing in the bank. Because all the money is, your money, I said, come up. Okay. That's basically the get money from. Instead, ask is, what experience do you have? I've been that problem. I think to start to go down.
Right.
About this thing, a corner office with an air condition.
Right.
And I do this.
Yeah.
And some days I sit back and I think, what a fool. But
most days I'm sure not.
Yeah, no. I don't have air condition, but I have like this huge air conditioner outside.
Right.
That I can enjoy anytime I want,
So how were you able to raise the capital that you needed?
Well, I used some of my money and I teamed up with Senvest and they're an amazing company. They understand the space that they're in and to work with them is like they take you through. They mentor you and you go along and you get quite a lot of support in doing what you're doing. I mean, I worked with a mentor Julius Ramushabi, who's left Senvest, unfortunately. But that guy, because I'm one of those guys who sort of like lie in bed and think about something, and then I'll send him a WhatsApp like 12 midnight, and then he'll respond quickly because I can't wait for this thing because it troubles me, and I'm not sure. I went and I looked, and there was a space that I wasn't happy with in terms of my maze and stuff like that. And so I would ask him the question, and he will respond. So I experience, and you plugged into somebody who help, and the association, the Bonds Mara Association, where you get help from those guys as well. So
what is your biggest need now?
Have you got the whole day?
The biggest need, as in one.
Just one. Look, I mean, on the farm you can't, because I think when I did this, I wanted it to have not just one or two legs, but I wanted to have a few legs that are there. I've got there's the dairy leg, there's the
Yes.
cattle, there's the, there's sheep, and there's maize, and so there's lots of things. And I think machinery becomes a big thing for me,
Right.
and I know for some of the people that are there.
Right.
And it's not easy to actually go to a bank and say, I need a loan and I want to buy. They'll just look at you and think,
Right.
This one.
Yeah.
Forget about him. So.
Yeah.
So it's those things that gives you a stop start, and I think that the receptiveness of the funding institution would make a big difference, because when you look back and you look at the successes that Land Bank is showing us here, but behind those successes, there's like tons of failures, and all we talk about is they failed. I mean, the government gave them this. We don't actually look and say, why? What happened? Why didn't they succeed?
Right.
It's because they didn't have somebody to back them up. And farmers don't want handouts. They want to be given an opportunity to get funding so they can do their work and pay you back.
Right.
You know what I mean? So it's not like they're standing there with hands out like this and a hat to say, give me the money. And I think that's what needs to come out. And this country needs economic transformation, radical or otherwise, but it's needed, and you can only do that by looking at farming as a place that can actually absorb a lot of people in terms of employment.
Okay.
Right. So if you then prop those guys up, and don't give them handouts, but make them work for it, let them pay back the loans that they are taking, and I think. It will go further. And in the farming community, contrary to popular belief, there are a lot of white farmers who are actually willing to help. I've been privileged to go to different. There's always a word and encouragement, and sometimes it's not like they're on certain things that you can do that can make.
Herbert, thanks for that. Let me come to the initial response that the gentleman that he met gave him and how he kind of felt. And he made a comment that I thought, oh my goodness, here we go again. We talk about these partnerships, and very soon we're going to talk about the initiatives that are already happening in the industry. But I want to go back, especially with your experience of negotiating or being part of the negotiated settlement here in this country. In your own view, how much work have we done or still have to do in just making sure that certainly the different races, first of all, see themselves as equals, that the black farmer doesn't see themselves as an inferior, or the white farmer see themselves as a superior, so that this partnership actually happens. Because if you don't deal with that reconstruction, it's going to be very difficult, and it'll come through in what you hope to be a partnership from henceforth.
I think if we look back at our experience during those days that you're referring to, the period of the negotiations, first of all, you must remember, it took us 6 years. It was not something that was like that. From the day that Madiba walked out of prison till we had the final constitution, it was in fact 7 years, 1990 to 1997. And, we started off with the same misgivings with each other. I mean, I'm quite sure when most of the guys on the other side of the table, meaning on the ANC and the Black Party side, entered the room, starting talking to us, they were looking at us as the boer.
And that means not the farmer.
That's not the farmer in this case. So there was a lot of mistrust when we started. But fortunately, through the process of negotiations, and particularly through the process of dialogue, we started to learn each other. And the social cohesion that developed through that was massive. That is what led to a peaceful settlement in South Africa. I think, in recent times, I've often asked myself, what should we have done differently with regard to the ongoing need for transformation, which is still there. I mean, the constitutional or political change, transition, happened in a swift moment. It was like on the 27th of April, 1994, the new constitution or the interim constitution came into operation. But the process of economic and social transformation is ongoing. it's like you said, 23 years later, and we are far from completion. So what should we have done differently? What is the absent factor? And I think what we should have done at that time was to continue with a process of dialogue on the real economic transformation of the country, sector by sector. Some of it happened within the broader business environment through black economic empowerment. In the beginning, there were many mistakes made. It started with fronting and all sorts of nonsense. I think over a period of time, it started to develop within the business environment, different industries, into, a working relationship, let's put it that way, with success. But in others, like in agriculture, there's a lot that's not happened yet. And I think that what we need now is a real dialogue between the different role players, between the different components of the industry, to actually come to that success. I mean, land reform is part of it. It's not the total picture. What is more important is, first of all, to promote agriculture as an industry in South Africa. Because most South Africans, the people in the cities, don't think of agriculture as really something of importance for the country. They forget that it's a very important contributor to the GDP of the country. Similarly, like Herbert and others were saying, we have to look at food security. We have to look at job creation. All important components and contributors from the side of agriculture. And so I think we are now in a phase where we can say we are at the starting point of opening up a dialogue, of serious content that can actually materialize what we should have done already by now.
Okay.
But what is important is that we have to have all the role players, and we could come back to this, I would like to, in fact, to say what I think can happen.
All right.
And what are the different role players up to do.
Right, we'll do that in a moment indeed. Thank you so much for those comments, Roof. Let me go to Charles. Charles, you told me a story that's I find interesting because, again, just like I thought every person who was called a boer meant something else other than a farmer, I also thought that every Afrikaner that is indeed a farmer has inherited these big fat farms from 100 years on. Your family story is not quite like that. It's quite different. Just take us through that and also reflect for me, how do you then get the commercial farmers to be part of the solution, to see it in their interest, to be part of this inclusive growth story that we're talking about, and really commit to it?
Yeah, Dele, our story started way back. It's a third generation that's part of exposed to agriculture, that's involved in agriculture, but we didn't inherit that we're having today. So we had to. But we had the background, what Herbert doesn't have. So we had the background. We could go. We had access to mentorship people, big farmers sitting in this audience today. Some of them, and they've actually showed us the way and gave us direction. And then we went back and we know we had a nice idea of what and a feeling of what agriculture is like. What's going on in agriculture. Part of his visits to his mentor, so-called mentor, is to understand what's going on in agriculture. There's no programs, there's no models, there's nothing that we roll out for the youth, for the young people. Anyone that wants to get into agriculture, where do they start? Go and Google it. Go and Google transformation in South Africa. You'll only find a definition of a transformation. By the way, that definition means radical transformation or radical change. So radical transformation means radical
change. Yeah.
Okay. The point is, we need to have programs, models that we can set out. Give people exposure to how does the industry work. What's the role of agribusinesses, the farmers' cooperatives. Teach them management skills, farm skills, bookkeeping. How does the supply chain works? So that's all things that you need to know, but you can't pick it up. So you have to go through the process, and that it's always a sense of insecurity. You don't know where you are. So that's what happened to us. But fortunately, we had access to those people. So and then you start. It's a entrepreneurial environment. And then you need to start to see, okay, listen, this is what I can do. This is how it works. My first line I got from the land bank. Thanks for that. And that helped me. So exactly the same as Herbert. And I think that's the starting point is totally a different reference. It's so difficult for somebody that's not in this family of agriculture to enter it. It's actually, you have to raise your hat for those people.
Except, to your point, though, one could argue that Charles Rousseau, even though he's got a little bit of background that Herbert Mabuza didn't, but even in those networks and in those opportunities to be mentored, there's at least some kind of cultural proximity. It's a space that, just because of the side of the highway he was born on, he could get that access. The key question is, how do we get more Mabuzas? How do we make sure that the next time a Mabuza says, I want to get into farming, I want to learn, I'm willing to give in the time, I've got maybe a little bit of capital to get in. Sometimes the perception is that the other side is not even interested in engaging. So the question I have for you is that the case?
Well, it's actually, the activists, some of the activists will think like that, and some of the troublesome whites will use this as an excuse. Look at the failures, look at transformation is being abused and is being seen as white monopoly. So to get those people involved is really. I see a lot of energy in agriculture. I see a lot of projects. Everybody's running around. It's like a chemical reaction. It's a hell of a reaction. There's no output. The goodwill is there. Everybody wants to make a change. I think we've come a long way. Can I just stop for 1 second? I just need to get clarity on a few things. If you look at commercial agriculture where it stands today, it has developed in the 90s from a one-channel marketing system to where it's today, where it's into a free market system. We had to reform. We had to reform all the structures. We had to, and there was a lot of inside fighting, a lot of politics in the 90s, in the 80s. They didn't play the ball, they played the man. So agriculture had to sort themselves out. There were very sensitive issues on those days. Then technology came along. The influence of the consumer influence in agriculture, in farming production became a reality. And we got more integrated in the global markets. So that all put a lot of pressure on the South African farmers. Plus, they had to brace themselves for nature issues, droughts, too much rain, as well as currency fluctuations. So that, and they're participating in the global markets. If you don't adapt, you're going to die. So they were occupied with that to a certain extent. I think now, after a few years, and it all went parallel with this free democracy that we got, I thought we can really engage into transformation, get those people on board and start to make a difference. I think the goodwill is there. The farmers got the capabilities of helping somebody else, but not the farmers. We should set up a structure like a high performance or a center of excellence,
right,
where you can engage everybody there, because there's too many people running around,
yes, and
we have to coordinate it. From government departments, agriculture, commodity departments, agribusiness, there's a hell of a lot of energy that goes into that, and nothing happens.
All right, let me actually move on to Chris. On that note, Chief Executive at AFGRI, you've got your own initiatives that are happening, Chris. I know about harvest time investments. I don't know about some of the work that's done at AFGRI. Maybe as you reflect on what we're talking about and some of the comments from Charles, lots of things being done by lots of people, but maybe not as cohesive as it ought to be.
That's certainly the case. I think what Charles has mentioned, just to touch on that point, is we engage a lot with commercial farmers on transformation. And I must say, I haven't come across one farmer that's not willing to help or not willing to assist or not willing to transfer knowledge. And that is the goodwill that we need to take forward. We need to embrace that goodwill on both sides. From an AFGRI point of view, in terms of looking at transformation, we started with initially looking at individual development, small-scale farmer development, which has grown over periods. We also learned a lot of lessons in the sense of saying, how do we embrace it? How do we make more commercial farmers? Because a lot of good, successful farmers today also started off, as Charles referred to, fairly small. So if we can start on embracing those small-scale farmers who has the passion and the heart to learn, you know, maybe in 20, 50 years from now, you can have those commercial farms. And I think that's our approach, is to say, from a food security point of view, how do we look after our country when we're 80, 90 million people and we still need to produce our own food and not import food? And that is where your farming community, the commercial farmer, the small-scale farmer, land bank, government, we all need to take hands and say, how do we embrace that? So yes, we start with small-scale farmers. We start with embracing those small guys. A lot of help from commercial farmers. We had examples where a small-scale guy couldn't harvest his soybeans. We find support from the neighboring farmer, a commercial farmer. So all of those stories needs to be coordinated somehow. I think we're all busy as agricultural companies, as farmers in their own right. Government is doing a lot of work, land banks doing a lot of. So maybe somehow tell those stories and embrace the good that was done. We also moved on a little bit in the sense of harvest time, where we said that to touch one small-scale farmer is good and well, but what if you can touch a community and make that community sustainable? So we moved on to a program where we take the farmers in one community to try and engage with them and trying to support them as well, so that you create a sustainable community within that region instead of the young guys moving away from that region.
Before I move on to Loyiso, question for both of you gents. How much of the conversation around this transformation agenda, from the farmer's perspective at least, about supporting communities, creating jobs, call it more broad-based empowerment, which I guess all South Africans are clearly bought into. But how embracing is the community to creating and supporting an entrepreneur who wants to own, operate, and be, call it in a couple of years' time, the same as Charles Rousseau? Is there a difference between the two? Is there an equal embracement, or perhaps happy to help the community, happy to create jobs, but maybe not too excited about creating another Charles Rousseau?
No, I think that's the point. You know, that's what we're looking for. And there's a lack of those people. We need to find people that we can take up and make them the next farmer, the next commercial farmer. And there's a lack of those people. We need to reach out to those communities, identify those people, and most probably they are at the universities that get taken up by all the agribusinesses. So they don't end up at primary production level. So that's part of the problem. So we have to really to get people that you can take on board and develop them in commercial farmers is a difficult question. It's one of the things that needs to be addressed. We need to be strategic about it, identify those people, set them up, not for failure, but for success. Let them plug into, like Herbert said, into some of the bigger farmers that can give them access to markets, that's got offtake agreements that the banks like to have that. So I think we need to apply our mind. We need to take this conversation much further than just around this.
Chris?
Yeah, maybe just add on. I think the challenge from a community point of view has a lot to do with infrastructure and development around the infrastructure. It's easy. Not easy, but I think on the one scale where you look at farm workers and getting them into a farmer's trust on development, there's already a relationship and they already had that relationship with the farmer, and that can be expanded on. When you actually sit in an environment where you say, let's look at one community who has no infrastructure, how do they move that product to market? We're doing some work in Zambia as an example. So just for that community to be able to find an offtake for their market, it's good and well to farm. But ultimately, you need a product to be sold somewhere.
Yes.
And I think that's the key from a community point of view. What we start doing in South Africa, and I think the goodwill that we're seeing, we need to expand on that. But when you get to a community, that infrastructure needs to be built, and that's where the relationship with government actually becomes very important. Let's
move on to you, Loyiso. Land Bank, you've heard the comments about the money, certainly from Mr. Mabuza there. Yeah, he needs some bucks. You've had your successes. We've seen some of that earlier on today. Where are you in terms of making those programs more and more sophisticated to match the demand? And maybe let me also pose the same question to you, creating those fewer businesses that can have a bigger impact. Just as an example of, hey, here is a Mabuza, here is a Kumalo, we've created an actual industrialist in this space.
And I think that the point you make in the beginning about trust is a critical part of that conversation. Because actually, in executing any type of project or program, it is premised upon trust. So your execution, your highs and lows of execution, strengthen a trust relationship such that you speed up on what's required. So we see our role, and I think Chris land, we know, and you need agronomy. There's a technical capability that is, it doesn't develop. You have, and what we found is that to be able to intermediate, to give your money and trust that it will return. The responsibility we have as an institution is to make sure that when we give money, that money works across the value chain, that it impacts everybody, not just a couple of people.
Right.
Strategically, we've also decided, as Charles was referring to, that actually growth comes across a pyramid. So you grow an economy by increasing the number of commercial farmers. So you make a specific effort to increase the number of people that work at an industrialist scale. You also make an effort to move those that are smallholder farmers towards commercialization, towards wanting to farm at commercial scale. And by moving everybody up a value chain, you begin to start dispersing the benefits across. You also saw some of the examples that you have there, that government, I think, has been very specific in using agriculture as a lever for particularly employment opportunities. That the nature of the sector is such that it is the one place where when you talk about how to employ at scale, you can do it within the sector. How to industrialize and find opportunities for technology, sit on the cusp of using technology for yield, you can do that as well. And when you look at the success of South African commercial farmers, and they will tell you, they're amongst the best in the world. I mean, globally, the yields that they have are comparative to anybody in Europe and in US. And Charles will also say to you that in the legislative changes that happened within the sector, they moved from being a kind of a very regulated, subsidized industry to a free market system where they had to compete globally. And actually, even though the number of participating farmers has reduced, actually, yields have increased. So what it tells you is that they've increased their ability to deliver food security, and they've managed to be able to beneficiate that. And the focus now is to make sure that everybody moves up, that it doesn't just start at the top level, at commercialization, that you begin to start in making sure that one person with their 1 acre can do something effective with that land such that you begin to start moving up the value chain.
Let's talk about some of the challenges that you might face. So from what I've heard from you guys, you have an industry, let's talk commercial farmers specifically, that has over the years, contrary to perhaps how it's communicated or received, is actually quite warm to the idea of let's find more and more ways to be more inclusive in our industry. That's a very big positive. On the other side, you've got more and more black people wanting to get into the industry, wanting to grow. And on the middle, you've got facilitators, government at a department level and a land bank, a state-owned entity. What have then become some of the challenges that you encounter? Let's go to the meat now and talk about at this. One suggestion we certainly have from Charles is this got to be done at an industry level. It can't be bits and pieces at a bottom. And I think that's a very, very important point. On the funding side, how do we ensure that we don't have a Mabuz found himself a mentor, got himself a property, he's already building, but you know, his machinery is not up to scratch. He's spending more time repairing it than actually going out and working on his farm. How do we make sure that the funding model is more and more conducive to that level? Because I get a sense
our view is that there is money available in the system. I mean, we have a generic term. And by that I mean, and it was referred to by both Chris and by Charles, there is money available in government to be able to support growth. Whether it's sitting at rural development, whether it's sitting at Department of Agriculture, it is money available in the fiscus to support large-scale commercial farmers, smallholder farmers. The trick is in blending that finance. So finding those opportunities to take the public funds, to make sure that we take on the risk to facilitate access. So to make sure that those people that want to come into the sector are able to do that, and then move them to a scale where they can then take on financing for growth purposes.
Right.
For growth purposes. So it is about making sure, and it is about alignment. It is about making sure that the conversations we are having have the same outcome so that we know where it is that we're trying to go to. Two, acknowledging the pools of available financing. And I always say that money is not the answer to everything. You know, that you can have money available, you can have land available, but actually it is in the work, it is in the execution that the benefit comes. And unless you are able to find somebody that you can work with that can take you through the tough conversations about farming, when your yields are not what they should be, when the oranges that you produced are below the gap standard that's required, when you know that you're not going to be able to make that type of money, there's a technical requirement and a capability in farming and a reality check that you need. So from my side, I always say that your financing is a challenge. It is the alignment in order to be able to align to where people.
Mabuza, back to you. What about the you are? You write really good stories. You got to run a business now, right? Farming, it's but on the other, dig down in salt.
I think for me, my newspapers, you then do is you try business of agriculture with people through the. It's not. You know, it's those little things that you then get into. That's the crux of the issue. So I came in business understanding, having been the biggest papers in the country and the two. So that was not my handicap really. Right. My handicap was how to do the synverses that will come and what do you need to actually to prepare those things. So you then drop your budgets and those are important. And then because of my laziness, I do the things and sends them to SARS.
All right.
And you know,
and maybe let's take it a little forward because we've got an example, Rolf, of a country right next door to us, who at a point made a decision on land redistribution, and I'm being kind. The people from that country, I certainly remember that time, were very excited, very happy. A lot of people I knew in South Africa were saying that's exactly what Mandela should have done. He sold us out. He should have just taken the land and given it. Thankfully, the Lord has kept me alive long enough to see how that went belly up. Lessons for us in that? Because there's a lot of talk currently about land redistribution without compensation. It's bordering on our neighbor on the border up north there. Your reflections on that?
You're not talking about Botswana.
No. No.
So, you know, I think the interesting thing and the reality is, or the truth is, that all of those things are starting to bite that country now. Maybe already for the last few years. Because they ran out of food, and of course their economy is collapsing every day more and more. I think what we are seeing there now, and I know of a few examples because we are doing in the institution I'm involved with, is doing some work in Zimbabwe, and for that reason I'm well exposed to the current situation there. And what we are seeing is that many of those old farmers who were exposed of their lands, of their farms, are now getting back into the business quietly, and in some cases even at the request of government, because they need the production. And we all know that Zimbabwe is a very productive country when it comes to agriculture. But there's no lesson there for us, quite frankly. I think the point is, and we've discussed it yesterday as well, that we can go that way, or that we are some. I think it will take us any policy papers, that's in the policy conference in July. You know, in that regard, wisdom. But that doesn't take away the responsibility. People get involved into land. I mean, we had political motives, protests against government. And we must be wary of the fact that mass mobilization can, without government instigation or without political instigation, simply because people might. My understanding is that from all accounts, land reform is being seen by the majority of. For that reason, it's exactly why we started to take an initiative, which hopefully can help us to direct the debate at least in the right way, and to bring all the different role players and all the partners together.
How do we do that?
During the last year, we've done a lot of homework. And when I say we, it's Land Bank, it's the agricultural business environment, AFGRI, Senves, and others, and also a number of commercial farmers. Charles, Cully, who is in the audience, and many others out there. We've engaged together in finding a way on how we can take this forward. I mean, we've seen 3 examples through that clip at the beginning of very successful cases around the country. But there are literally hundreds of those, small scale and big scale. And we have to escalate this, like you've asked the question. We have to escalate this, but also get government involved. The Department of Land Reform is at stake here. It has a very important primary function as far as this is. But we've also learned that if they are not there, we have to carry on.
Are they there?
Unfortunately not. Not at the level that we require them. You would find individuals within the department that are engaged and that are very progressive in the way that they think things should develop. But they are not there as a component yet. And it's one of the frustrations, quite frankly, that the Land Bank has. They won't say it, but I know it. And it's one of the things that we can help with, is to bring forward this collective of approach that can escalate those numbers, like the 3 we've seen, into huge societal change in South Africa. And can I just, by the way, say, you know, as part of the homework that we are doing, we have collected a lot of information. There is, in fact, a sort of a database already available of these successful examples. But one thing that came to my impression very clearly in the last year is how commercial farmers actually create within their environment a social system for everybody that belongs to that farm or those farms. I was recently on a wine farm in the Western Cape for good purposes, as you can imagine.
Drinking wine, yes.
So I was there, and you know, I had this conversation with the owner, and he said, you know what, I had to create an old age facility on my farm, because what happens to the retired farm workers? Wow. They can't go away, they have nowhere to go. So I had to create that on my farm. And I think there are many such examples around the country. All these commercial farmers in the audience will be able to share their experience as far as that is. But it's not only as far as old age is, it's yes. also educational, it's social, it's health in many cases. And I think this is how we have to look at agriculture as a broad industry that is not looking only at making money for a few.
Before we wrap, let me ask Loyiso a question. When we talk transformation, we don't only talk black and white. Let's talk women. You know, often forgotten element of the agricultural industry. What's been the Land Bank's involvement in making sure that more and more women participate, particularly in the rural areas?
Actually, you would be surprised at the number of women that participate in agriculture in rural areas.
Not as employees.
As employees. So they participate, but they participate at a very specific level rather than across the value chain. Most of the projects that we've undertaken, particularly in areas such as the Eastern Cape, are driven by women, supported by women, and active participation in the business of farming. And what we have said is that we have an imperative to increase the number of women in youth. So we've made a commitment that over the next 2 years, we want to make sure that of the projects that we are financing, we specifically increase the number of women that work at management level, that own equity in some way or form in the businesses that they have, in addition to, of course, working in them. What we've also found, though, is that some of our most successful projects, if the truth be told, okay, are driven by women. So where women have taken the initiative to collaborate, Sis Gloria is sitting, oh, she's gone. Oh, there she is. Sis Gloria is sitting over there, where they have understood the economics of business and they have decided to take a broad approach to it, they are most successful.
Yep.
The project that Sis Gloria is involved in, I mean, has something in the region of 400 or so hectares, again on a hectare by hectare basis, through an institutional trust structure. And a large majority of those people that participate are women. In fact, over 60%, if I'm not mistaken, are women beneficiaries, and also through the management structures. So it is, again, one of the sectors that you use in order to be able to initiate change.
Right.
You know, you use it as a lever to agitate for the type of outcomes
Right.
that you know you want, but you structure it. You don't let it happen by itself. But
But I guess it goes back to Rolf's point about, and I guess Charles's point about this kind of dialogue. The more I listen to all of you guys, there's a lot going on in different pockets. The more I speak to you, maybe it's the economy, maybe it's the times, there is a lot more willingness and commitment for all parties to get this right. But you clearly need one central place where the conversation needs to be happening, so that there's an industry-wide program for young people to make sure that they still see it as a career they want to get into, a program for women empowerment, to get the government on board, et cetera, et cetera. Because without that, everybody will kind of do their own little pockets. Maybe let's wrap by just getting some final comments from all of you guys, and I want you to focus on solutions, what needs to happen. Charles, I can almost predict what you're going to say, but let me let you have your spiel. What do we need to do, and do quickly?
Well, I think, you know, the first point is we need to look at transformation in agriculture in a totally different way. It's not a target that needs to be reached, but it's an attitude. I think if we embrace that, that's going to, you know, take us to just a new possibility. So what I'd like to see is that all the efforts being dealt with collectively, and really create the opportunity for anyone to know, to find a way, like a roadmap in agriculture. If you want to do this, you go to this guy, there's a finance, there's your mentor in that region. You can go to this co-op for information, or for an extension officer, there's a land bank. You know, make it easy for the guys, make a roadmap. Bring it back, bring it down to not this level of talk but to practical experience to people. So that's one point. You know, I just want to add something. You know, all this energy that goes in. If you look at this agri parks that the part of rural development are talking about, what's it different than just a farm? You know, it's a farm. Can't we get that money in all collectively, focus into this type of initiatives? So that's what I'd like to see.
Good man. Mr. Mabuza?
I think for me, I think that there's a disjoint in terms of this financing. There's all these pieces all over the place, and you need a pipe that you come in here and you get in there and it's done. Because I think that once you do that, you make it easier for people that are coming in. They know where to go. Instead of knocking at like 17 or 75 doors, you knock in one door, you go in, and you have an understanding. And what this country has is an abundance of people with experience in doing those things. So if you hook up with them, and the funds are, so when I go to somebody who understands and I say, this is what I want to do,
Yes.
and he looks at me and says, this is hokey pokey, it's not going to work.
Yes.
Right? So there's no time wasting there. It's done. Right. They say to me, go and refine this thing because it's not going to work, and the reasons are 1, 2, 3. So I then, instead of me giving land bank this and that one there, and then I'm waiting for them, it's like 2 years now down the line, nobody's come back to you, and all that. So there is, as it was said, that there is money in those in agriculture, in rural development and agriculture, but the chicken doesn't have a head. You know what I mean? There needs to be coordination to this area and says, here we've got like these 5 people that we're working with, we're pushing them up to that level, and then we'll go and take the next 5
Right.
and push to that level. But the pipe is the same.
Right.
On the other side, there's Land Bank, there's all these people with
Right.
money. I know Land Bank has got money. There's all these people who are sitting with money.
Yes.
But you come into this pipe, it'll make it simple, it'll make it easier. I want a tractor, I'm not going to flutter around and go everywhere. Come into this pipe and I go and I say, give me the money.
And Herbert,
I'll pay you back.
and dare I say, by the industry.
Absolutely.
IP, the knowledge of the industry sits with the industry. So when you go and say, I want to buy a tractor, maybe there's somebody who will say, no.
You don't need that.
You don't need a tractor yet. You first need to fix something else. Because a lot of us who keep going and raising the funding, particularly from DFIs, is that we're going to ask for something that we don't even know we need yet. So it's probably something that needs to be led by the industry that must now plug in government, plug in the DFIs, plug in even the commercial banks.
Yeah.
Great point. Chris?
Look, I think everybody said it, Dele, from our side. Unfortunately, there's no handbook in terms of how to transform, in terms of what you know that things need to change. And the way that the prior 2 years in terms of discussing transformation is this year there's an approach of saying let's talk about, let's do it together. There's one focus in terms of almost a unified focus in terms of let's just do something. And Ruth mentioned that a lot of work has been done over the last year, and I think that is really where we need to drive it to. So that we can take actual examples, we need to create these platforms and somehow plug in these platforms into people out there that knows that it exists actually.
And the great thing, Chris, is we already have a chairman of that organization right
Absolutely.
here. A man with absolute experience on how to get people together. Loiso, Land Bank, you've got the money, we know that.
We've always got lots of money to give away for free, obviously. Please do not quote me on that. so I think most of the points have been covered about the need for a consolidated view of the industry. Your point is valid that it has to be led by the industry. This is not the business of government. The business of farming is not the business of government. It's the business of farmers, and we have deep capability inside this country to be able to drive this industry. I also mentioned yesterday that Côte d'Ivoire, who was here yesterday, I mean, their agricultural sector contributes 60% to GDP. Ours is 2.3%, but it has potential to move up to about 12, 13, 14, 15%. It used to contribute at about 25, 26, 27%. And the opportunity is here to be able to use the sector to leverage that growth. Underlying all of that is where you started about the danger of one story. So the problem with one story that you've heard, that you understand, is that it robs you of the opportunity to see things differently. Now, what we are talking about here is that we're saying that not only is the difference, can you see the difference, you can evidence it. This is not impossible, it is doable. And transformation and change can come, but it requires effort, it requires focus, and it requires a belief that it can be done.
Great stuff. Ruth, closing comments?
Well, we mentioned the homework that's been done. So the news is that we are in fact going to launch something of a coordinating point that can operate in such a way that it can make a contribution to what Charles and Herbert were saying. Even if it's small scale at the beginning, but from there it can hopefully escalate. It can put into motion the big requirement, or for fulfilling the big requirement. With the help of Land Bank, and I must say, and I think it's clear by now, Land Bank under aggressive, going beyond their mandate, fulfilling their mandate. And I think they are taking a very progressive position as far as their work is concerned. And within that framework, we all feel comfortable that land bank should be the anchor to do the coordinating work. All of us will help. All of us sitting here will help, and some others in the audience will help. But the most important thing is we have to get this into motion.
Yes.
There's been a lot of talk. And just by the way, we looked at what, for instance, the motor manufacturing industry is doing or have done. And they've been producing a very successful example of partnership. Partnership also between them and the government. And we have had discussions with them. We look very carefully into their example. There's a lot that we can learn from that and putting it into the agricultural environment. So we hope that within a month or so from now, we can actually let the world know what we are planning to do as far as this is.
Good.
To make a start, to put all this information together that we have now collected, and to inspire others to follow suit, to carry it through, and to make this something that can be of great success, not only for the industry, but every role player involved.
Great stuff. Thank you so much for that, Ruth. Thank you to all the panelists. Thank you for your time. Thank you for making the contribution. Dare I say that time is not on our side. I do think that there is an energy in the country that could rob us, or we can make use of it and move rather quickly, but it could rob all of our efforts if we do nothing. And I do think that this is the one industry that's probably at the right time for this kind of stuff. Everybody's kind of ready and knows the benefits and sees it. I think the opportunity is definitely there. But for now, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you so much for joining us. Remember, of course, to follow us on Twitter and visit the website nationinconversation.co.za. From us here at NAMPO, it's goodbye. I think now we're going to open for the really good part of the session, which I personally always enjoy, which is taking some questions and having some commentary. You've heard what the panelists have to say. I've thrown in some views. Let's hear from you guys. What are your thoughts? Even if it's comments, it doesn't have to be a real question. If you just want to add to the conversation, please feel free. Is there a microphone going around? Please give it to the gentleman there. Just tell us who you are and where you're from, and go ahead.
Hi, I'm Gerard Thijs from Farmers Weekly magazine. I've got two questions, one for Mr. Rousseau. I was speaking to farmers in the beer tent yesterday, and so they didn't hold back on what they thought. So I asked them who had a kind of project with emerging farmers, and some of them said they all had, but they want some incentive, because in the end, all farmers are businessmen. So I just want to hear from you, what do you think for the smaller farmer, not someone with a huge industry, but someone with 600 head of cattle and some maize or soya, what can government or land bank or someone do to actually just incentivize them? Just to, I don't know, maybe you've got an answer.
Incentivize them for what?
To assist emerging farmers.
Okay.
To do that out of their own accord. And a lot of them were doing it already, but they said there were a number of challenges. And sorry, just for Mr. Mayor, we mentioned, or it was mentioned through the week that we're maybe sitting on a time bomb. You just mentioned that it might be a little bit too late to start this conversation now, or we're sitting on an edge. When I drove here from Johannesburg, I had to take a 100-kilometer detour because the highway was closed by service delivery protests. I spoke to a farmer yesterday. He said he had to reroute a truck full of weaner calves by 250 kilometers because the road was closed by service delivery protests. That cost for that extra kilometers is going on to the consumer. But people don't realize that. I don't think people think of agriculture. Are you taking the service delivery protests into account when you're talking to Land Bank, talking to other stakeholders? Thank you, that's it.
Great stuff.
Okay, it's a valid question, and I think I want to answer it in two ways. Obviously, you need to incentivize people because we're operating in a commercial environment. It's a free marketing environment, so you can escalate the whole process. And why? Ask a question. What's the difference between a farmer and somebody, a businessman in town? I mean, why does the farmer have to pay for all of this? So we have to answer that question. To escalate this, I think the goodwill is there and the willing is there and everybody wants to make a difference, especially on the farms. But we need to ask that question. So that's why we have to have a strategic think tank to sort that out. But one of the problems you have is running into the mandate of the land bank. They haven't got a mandate to subsidize interest rates or payment terms. So they first have to go to Parliament to change that mandate. And that's one of the obstacles we need to address. That's why we need this level of thinking and all the ringkoppe get together so that they can really influence people for the right reasons.
Can I add to that and pick up from the motor industry's experience? You see, very often the conversation about transformation is often seen as a race issue. If you take it to its next progression, and about the interests of the populace, is about how do I as a country incentivize corporate, i.e. business people who are driven by value, who are driven by profits. How do I incentivize them to invest more in a country so that more and more of the people who live in that country are employed, and of course, the wealth trickles on. So often we look at transformation as how does Andile become a farmer, but not necessarily. Sometimes it's about the industry driving policymakers to create the necessary incentives to make sure that industry continues to thrive. Because what do business people want? They want to be successful in business. Yes, they care about the country. It's not that they don't care or they're racist or all of that. That's not true. It's just that when we wake up every day as business people, before we think about whether the bin has been collected or water is running, we're thinking about how to grow our businesses. That's just the way we're wired. So I would go back and challenge the industry once again. To answer the question that I think those small-scale farmers are asking is something that the industry of farmers needs to take to the government and say, these are the ways that you can find ways to incentivize us. Instead of looking to the land bank to do everything, to Charles's point, they don't have the mandate for some of these things. And if you look at the motor industry, they get huge benefits from the stuff they do out in Pretoria and the stuff they do out in East London. Huge benefits. They don't do it because they care about South Africa. Well, I'm sure they do, but that's not the reason. They do it because the incentives are there for them to continue plowing back and employing our people. So we also need to escalate the conversation beyond the haves, Afrikaner farmers, how they help. As the government creates enabling environment to be to make sure that creating the education, creating the systems, creating a commercial conversation. And I think sometimes, to your point earlier, rob yourself of seeing it from different eyes. As a country, we just can't wait.
How are you going to approach social? What's the approach to that? He's going to answer those questions.
Great points. You also had a question.
Yeah, about the
that
protest.
was addressed to you. Yes, indeed.
The interesting thing is I don't know which road you took, but it depends. And talk about land reform, it's not only agricultural land, that's its areas, which affects all areas. Well, for all of here, enough people that want to be accommodated in terms of ownership of land in urban areas. We'll talk about that. And I think there's a solution. From a legal point of view, definitely so. So I think that, the answer in short is whether it's service delivery or whether it's about land, we are seeing at the moment, what they are experiencing at the moment, for dialogue. And I think it helps us also to motivate why we are doing what we're doing.
Great stuff. Sis Gloria Sir Robert from Whipple is in the audience. She just picked up a hand. Do you don't mind just getting the microphone there?
I like your suit, Gloria.
It's very colorful.
I must be a girl today. It's comments and maybe this country here. Listen for us. The comment I want to mention thing in the boardrooms, in the ex-committee, we come from the different parts of this country. But as a farmer, and you need Pondoland, you need, and I know the lifestyle. To have these diversified conversations in the boardrooms, it makes a business. So when you talk about transformation, we're also talking about expanding the business. Maybe that is one thing that we need to talk about. Our political history separated people And so what you know as a hiking sport, for wild, so in that boardroom, we must talk about that. That is the issue of diversity. The farmers, sometimes your leg is better by your daughter. And this emphasis on this son of yours, who's sometimes useless, quite frankly. It might be that your legacy is in the hands of your daughter. We need to go that route again.
Yeah.
And keep it Rousseau corporate for the next 100 years under this daughter who's married to Erasmus. It can be done.
Right.
It's
Charles, that's for you, man.
But the last point I wanted to say is that, of course, the pressure is on the landowners. I would like some pressure on the input providers. The moral pressure on the input providers. They are left on their own and they are doing immoral things. And they have to be given pressure in terms of, you speak about small oranges. Those oranges are small because they gave you the most hopeless, useless part of their seeds because you're ignorant, you're not sophisticated enough, and they charge you the price of the grade 1 seed.
That's it.
That pressure has got to go to the input providers. The last pressure that must come, it must go to the retailers now. Last year, a bag of maize was 250 rand. This year is 90 rands. Because we are all working on the SafeX prices, we know what it is. But in those places where they need this maize most, that price is kept at 250 rand. That's cruel. That is criminal. So I think the pressure for me must move along with the landowners, yes, and the input providers and the retailers. Oh, by the way, the land people, the land preparation people must not be left off the hook. They also know that they are doing ridiculous things there. So if we want these transformation projects to work, if we want this land farm project on everybody, at least to do the moral thing. Thank you.
Reflections, panel?
Look, it's absolutely right. I think from a process point of view, we forget there's a full value chain, and the value chain needs to contribute. And I think the point that Gloria is making, it's sometimes, you don't sometimes need the motivation. It's the right thing to do. It's morally correct to do it, you know. And I think that stands out. And from a South African point of view, we certainly need to take up that flag and say, how do we do the right thing through a value chain? If you look at our neighbours that you refer to, the last number I heard was the unemployment is 80%. So the problem that we forget is that once you get to a point where you have no production locally, that affects everything. It's going to affect your processing, it's going to affect your retailers. So I think from a process point of view, Gloria is absolutely correct.
And I guess
it must be a value chain approach.
And I guess to Gloria's point, when those challenges happen in various programs, there is no central place that is in the industry to take that up with, right? Because how then do you deal with seeds at the same price? Where do you raise that? Where do you get the help to fix that?
Yeah, absolutely.
Things that dealt with quite quickly. Otherwise, the thing is kind of left to itself.
Yeah.
Let me take maybe another round of questions and comments, and then we can wrap. Gentleman right in front here.
Hi, I'm Chris Burgess from Landbouwerkblad. I completely agree with Mrs. Arob. You know, we sat at Nampo Harvest Day and we talk about food security and but if you go to the rural areas, if you go to the Transkei, you go to where my folks farm, you know, I look at the food inflation figures and it's just not, you know, what the NAMC is coming out with in terms of food inflation. It's not the food inflation that you're paying in the Transkei. You look at the stunting figures. I mean, we talk about a country that's food secure, but you have 14 million people that sleep, that go to bed hungry. The stunting levels under our youth in places like the Transkei, I mean, you know, it's unconscionable. And the point is just that, you know, for somebody living in Tsolo, who doesn't have food to eat, he might as well just be living in Zimbabwe. You know, it doesn't for him, it doesn't matter that we have some of the most advanced agriculture on the continent. And I just, you know, maybe it's a question for Rolf, you know, how does that fit into the wider picture? You know, because we're talking about land reform and getting people onto the land, getting people productive. But at the very base level, you know, we don't seem to be able to get the logistics right that we can actually provide cheap food to people living in the deep rural areas. I mean, from Elliot to Maclear, I don't think there's a mill, a maize mill. We're producing a hell of a lot of maize in that area, and it all gets brought up to the Rand, gets milled up here, and then gets brought down there. And I just never hear that conversation in agriculture. You know, what are we doing to actually, you know, are we really producing the food cheap enough for our
Everyone.
people?
Yeah. Very fair point indeed. Let me I was about to embarrass you, so you've raised your hand. That's great. That's Nono, one of the very few young farmers I know, certainly black women. You might want to add something that we all crocs are missing here.
Thank you, Andile. As you've mentioned, my name is Nono Sekgoto. I am a commercial farmer in the Free State. And yes, Gloria, I'm the one who's going to look after my father's farm. And I'm the one who's
Yay!
So I actually really appreciate the fact that there's a lot of conversations around collaborations and actually getting things organized so that there is one place to be able to, you know, reach out to. As one of the positions that I'm in right now, I'm a National Youth Coordinator for AFASA. And I must say, the reach of youth who are interested in agriculture has been absolutely astonishing. Just the participation that I get on the Facebook groups and on emails, you know, people are looking for so many things. I mean, how much can I really help? And for me, I think the focus now is really to collaborate with organizations and partners who are talking about this collaboration and finding ways to put things along one channel where people can actually go to. And that's really like where I see even my career is going to go. You know, the farm for me was an interesting place to learn, but I think it's in that place of coordinating all these things. And I think that's going to be an interesting space to play in. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Nono. Round of applause. I must tell you also that Nono is organizing a Young Farmers Conference on the 14th and 15th of August in Gauteng, am I right? So please, if you are interested in taking this conversation forward, these are the people that need our support. So please make sure you get a hold of her. It's 2 days. It's young people, very much focused in the farming industry. I think it's a no-brainer. Shall we get one last question or comment, and then we'll wrap for the day? Going once.
Hello, my name is Estelle Kronian from Pretoria FM. I would like to ask you guys, we're talking a lot about mentorship. What are your dialogue? You were referring to how important it is, and I have these discussions as a radio, but that there's negativity, and there's the lack to do that proper dialogue for that dialogue, or is it down to the people, someone who comes? Thank you.
Face where you feel like you need to say something. Go ahead.
How interested are you in learning something? One of the things that I do is I drive around and I think people are working or doing something on a farm, and I just drive in. Maybe one day I'll get shot, but that's okay. So I say, and I ask for the owner, and I just talk to him about what I think, what I see they're doing, and is it interesting me? And I think that sometimes it's that. It's just hunger for knowledge is very important. Sometimes because you don't know this person, you think, oh, you know, but go in and things. I've even asked people about ostriches. I know nothing about those things. And I want to know ostrich. I mean, so that in my head, at the back of my head, I know, oh, okay, so that's what they do with that thing.
Right.
You know what I mean?
So you got to ask.
Yeah, you have to ask. You know, sometimes, yeah, there is negativity at the bottom sometimes, but the temperature goes down.
Yeah.
One of the things that I think this country must never forget, and we must, a whole lot of restless young people out there, and you don't want to leave them out of the economic loop. So to bring them in, as she's saying that it's the organizing of the young farmers and bringing people into that, because the consequence is dire. Bring us from.
I tell her that it was a British constitutional law. It is from Germany, but they've been living, so they've been exposed to the South African. About 6 months ago, the two of them. You know what? Because people back in Germany and in the UK would not have been living through this in the same way that South Africans lived with us through this terrible experience. What I'm saying is, you know, and I'm telling this because I think there's much more in our society, and what do we to do institutions to do it always, and just go in and confront. And I think you are in the one, you know, because I listened yesterday to you. One has to confront yourself as to what is with industry. I do it as available for me. There's momentum, there's progress. And I think all of us as South Africans can make a contribution in that regard.
Great place to end. A round of applause, please, for our panelists.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you so much. That brings us to the end of our conversation for this afternoon. Thank you so much for attending. Please enjoy the rest of the day.
Thank you.
Thank you, colleagues and comrades. Comrade Roof.
Our family has been living on this farm for more than 150 years. Farming is in my blood, and ever since I was a little boy, I always dreamed of being just like my dad. Even if that meant waking up at the break of dawn to work the fields, waiting up all night with a lamb, working a 72-hour week, and yet despite this, having time to bring the family together. Farming is a part of me. It's my home.
Not will our aspirations of farmers who put food on our table us with a powerful work value chain that to the families it purpose it provides.